So now that we got silence, we're going to talk to. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Ulice Acosta Lanes. He's visiting from Old Havana, from Cuba. And I want to thank the Guns for hosting the talk, and also Vermont Caribbean Institute for sponsoring his whole trip here. He's been here for about a week already in Vermont, visiting different sustainability initiatives around the state. And so a little bit about Ulice. He received his undergraduate degree in biology from the University of Havana. He worked for several years as a plant biologist focused on varietal improvements at the National Tropical Agriculture Research Institute. He later worked for a state agency charged with conservation and development of the Bay of Havana, and he currently works for the Office of the City Historian in Havana as a specialist in environmental management and international cooperation for the Patrimony Community and Environment Program. Today he'll be sharing with us some of the environmental challenges the city faces and actions his office is taking to address these issues. So with that, I'll pass it on to Ulice.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I just want to say, thank you before everything to the BCI, just for giving me the chance to be here with you and see so much, lovely experience you have here in the city. So I am from a very small country, of course, but with very things that we have to do there. So thank you very much, Marisha. I must say that. And on the staff, from the CI, even all the people that have received me, and their houses, wherever, I'm very proud to be here. So I just want to share, with you, just to share some of the work that we do in Havana. So we try, probably, need some help for translation, because sometimes it's really hard for me, English is not my native language, so we try to do my best. So this is the first slide here, the rehabilitation of all Havana challenges of Utopia. Why that? This all Havana, Havana was founded in 16 November 1519. So it was first located in the south part of the country, but after, was moving, it goes, to the north part of the island. So it was like that a few years before. So Havana was created around, a system of squares. So there are 5 main squares in Havana. One of them is Plaza de Armas. It was built in 1519. It was the first square that we made there. So the square was changed to that picture you see right now. So there are other squares there: Plaza San Francisco de Asís, Plaza Vieja, Plaza la Catedral, and Plaza del Cristo. All those squares they were from north, south part of the city, and from east to west. So the main, roads and streets were crossing to them, so the city started to grow up. And then, in some way, Havana was developed. So those pictures shows how they are right now. This is the city, the province of Havana. The old Havana here is at the right, and historical part of the city. This part that you see here is the main historical part of the city. It was involved in a war that was operating the city for many years, around 200 years. So Havana has, surface. You can see, the numbers there. So probably, the main challenge that we have there is how many people could live here, in so small space. Because, the historical part of the city is only half of the municipality of Old Havana, but they have mostly, the 80% of the people that live in the municipality. So those are, some pictures that shows how was created the Historian's Office. It's an institution that's in charge of the restoration process of Old Havana. It was created in 1938, but now there are some changes inside this institution, but with many work to do, for sure. So those are, the facilities we have as an institution in Cuba. Because the Historian's Office, it's only subordinated, directly to the Council of the State. So we have legal personality, special fiscal status too, associated with a system of enterprises, and those system enterprises, are the way that we found to get money to put inside the restoration, because there isn't any other institution in Cuba that has this kind of approval by the state. When we have, a capacity to manage and reorientate the plans that we have in this part of the city. So most of the activity we have been done there cover the 32% of the historical part of the city. So we have so many policies, sure. So the main purpose that we have in that city, in that institution, is to promote the cultural heritage as a way, that people can enjoy. And of course, like the access to development, the restoration processes there. And then we have to protect and restore the cultural and environmental heritage of the city too, through a comprehensive plan of rehabilitation. But this plan is really integrated with many other kind of fields, their disciplines or wherever we work with. So there is no heritage per se, there is no social exclusion, there is no segregation, and the elderly people live inside the part of the city. We don't keep out them. So we have to provide a contemporary plan that could be adequate or adapted, to the conditions that we are living right now. So we have, of course, sources, and then we spend this money in the other plan. So here you can see, some of the numbers we have. Those are millions of dollars. So our system of enterprise, creates around $369 million per year. But we mostly use this money, you see there, of the rehabilitation plan. So the social projects cover around 56% of this amount. So the greatest challenges we have in the city, of course, our position, geographical position, San Juan exposed us, to the many hurricanes and bad storms that usually, affect the tropical islands. Cuba is one of the most affected islands in the Caribbean. So there's the lighthouse there. You see the wave, how it comes, over the lighthouse. This is the Malecón Tradicional. It's a seawall that we have in the first part of the city. It's the first face that we see when you go to Havana. So they are really dangerous sometimes. Sorry. Okay. Some other pictures that shows that. Just there, Havana Bay, is an ecosystem, but it's very polluted because there are many industries that were located, around the Havana Bay costa. So they were creating a lot of solid waste that right now we have to manage. And there are, some pollutants, refineries located there too. Of course, the European, waste that we have to manage because, there are so many buildings in very bad condition that sometimes they fall down. So you see some pictures, what we have to face there. I'm sorry. Yeah, floods. It's a big problem we have to deal with right now. Of course, we have rain season, and we have a dry season. The rain season is mostly from April to September, and the dry season from October to March, more or less. Could change sometimes, but mostly like that. So these are buildings that we have to recover. Fires. Our streets are very tight, so sometimes it's really hard, for the trucks to go inside. Even there are many pedestrian streets that is not able that cars or whatever, can circulate between those streets. You see that? It happened around 6 years before. So we have a planning and management tools there. You see here some of them. We have an strategic plan. We have a special plan for the integrated development. We have a urban plan regulations that those rules, we have to apply in order for what we can do or not to the buildings. And then we have an environmental strategy too. So we have some tools that help us, to do this program, like for example, a territorial information system, population and housing centers, and then we have the sectorial and community workshops. Of course, because the thing we have to do in Havana, we use, and then we have to put consulting to the population that lives in the city for sure, because they have to make their own opinions and if they are agree or not with the things that we do in Havana. Then we have a plan of investments for the ZPC. It's a prioritized zone for conservation, something like that. I don't know if you can. So we have sectorial plans, mostly housing, mobility, health, education, and environment. And then we have a urban projects, mostly related to the new buildings that we are constructing, not only at the historical part of the city, but other places too, like Chinatown and Malecón Tradicional. And then we have a group of land use. It's a kind of a group that integrates some experts, and they, of course, approve or not when we ask for license to construct or restore the building. Even when we want to make a use so for some of the buildings that we have there. And then we have a commission for the improvement of urban forests too, and the urban control, because we have to work with many other institutions from the Cuban government, and even from the Sistema de Planificación Physics Planification System. It's something like they prove where you can construct or where you cannot. So the environmental strategy is more related with my work. So we were, I think I need your help here.
Yeah.
Okay. O sea, eso fue un proceso que comenzó hace aproximadamente 10 años.
This process has started about 10 years ago.
Teníamos una estrategia que en realidad estaba muy desactualizada y solamente reunía algunos de los problemas ambientales que teníamos en ese momento que enfrentar en la ciudad.
They had a very old strategy at that time that only addressed certain environmental issues that they had.
So, se hizo muy necesario para poder hacer que coincidiera esa estrategia ambiental con el programa de desarrollo integral que tenía la ciudad.
So it was very necessary to link up the environmental plan, the previous one, with the current development plan of the city.
De esa forma nos vimos a la tarea de integrar todas esas instituciones que de alguna manera tenían responsabilidad en cada una de estas acciones que estábamos haciendo en la parte vieja de la ciudad.
So in doing that, they brought together all the different institutions that had a role to play in the different actions that he outlined before in terms of development of the city.
Esa estrategia ambiental, por supuesto, que está en directa coordinación con la estrategia nacional de medio ambiente que tenemos a nivel del país, con la estrategia provincial, con la estrategia de educación ambiental y por supuesto con la estrategia que desarrolla la Oficina del Historiador para su proceso de
So that
restauración.
environmental strategy is in line with the national environmental strategy, the provincial strategy, and the educational strategy.
Por lo tanto, esa estrategia tenía que de alguna manera resumir las necesidades o problemas que enfrentaba el país a nivel de país, pero también adaptarlo a las condiciones propias de nuestro sector, de nuestro centro histórico.
So it had to summarize the environmental problems at a national level, but adapt them also to the issues that the particular office was dealing with.
Comenzamos inicialmente acercando todas las instituciones que tenían responsabilidad, buscando los actores que tenían que hacer las obras, por supuesto, porque hay cosas que son de electricidad, de gas, de acceso al agua potable que no es competencia de los
So bringing together all the different sectors, water, gas, electricity that had an impact and have
e integrando
actions.
todas esas acciones que queremos desarrollar, por supuesto, con la comunidad a la cual íbamos a beneficiar.
Integrating all of them, and in addition the community, which is very important for us.
So, fue un proceso que duró aproximadamente 8 meses,
So it was an 8-month process,
gracias al apoyo de COSUDE, la Agencia de Cooperación Suiza.
and they got support from a Swiss COSUDE, the International Collaboration Institute.
Porque queríamos que ese documento no fuera solamente un documento que fuera una gaveta, sino también que fuera un instrumento como una política de trabajo que tuviéramos que seguir anualmente y por supuesto que nos permitiera evaluar cuán pudiera o no ser efectiva ese proceso de restauración que estábamos haciendo.
Right, so we wanted to make sure that it was a plan that could actually be implemented and respond to the actual needs of the community.
La estrategia tuvo varias etapas. La primera fue, por supuesto, seleccionar los actores que iban a participar en la confección de ella.
So first they had to choose who were going to be the right actors to
El
develop
grupo coordinador de esa estrategia,
the coordinating group of the strategy,
dividir los problemas ambientales en 3 grandes áreas,
divide the environmental issues in 3 big
porque
areas.
tenemos un ecosistema urbano, tenemos la bahía de La Habana como ecosistema costero, pero tenemos también un área que se le anexó a la Oficina del Historiador, que fue el Malecón Tradicional y el barrio chino, que sale de los límites del
So
centro
then they
histórico de la
had not
ciudad.
only the urban ecosystem of Old Havana, but then it was added on to them was the Malecón, which is the seascape, the walking boardwalk on the water, and then the barrio chino, which is the Chinese, how do you call it? Chinatown.
Por supuesto, eran localidades diferentes, con municipales diferentes, con gobiernos diferentes.
So the different localities with different municipalities and different governments.
So, de esa forma entonces se solucionaron esas tres grandes áreas de trabajo y comenzamos con un proceso de identificación de los grandes problemas ambientales que
So with
tenemos.
those three areas, they started to identify the main environmental challenges.
Se priorizaron esos problemas ambientales en dependencia del nivel, por supuesto, del daño o de afectación que creaban no solamente en las edificaciones, sino también en la población que vive en
So
el
they
entorno.
prioritized those issues dependent on both the physical infrastructure of the city and the population.
Y se priorizaron también teniendo en cuenta la dependencia o no, por supuesto, de fuentes de acceso y financiamiento para poder solucionar,
And also
porque todo tiene una base económica.
So also prioritizing the access to financial support.
De esa manera se solucionaron las tres grandes áreas, comenzamos a trabajar y se propusieron acciones e indicadores para evaluar ese proceso de intervención.
So then they proposed from that whole process actions and indicators to measure the
Básicamente los problemas más generales que se identificaron, y, o sea, por la población, porque fue la propia comunidad que lo identificó, fueron el estado como tal de las inmobiliarias, es decir, de las edificaciones,
So the main issues that were identified with community input was the state of the actual buildings.
los problemas relacionados a con la contaminación, y en este caso hablamos a nivel de contaminación atmosférica, a nivel de los suelos, a nivel del ecosistema Bahía de
So
Havana,
issues with pollution, both air, soil, and the bay.
el manejo de los residuales, fundamentalmente líquidos y sólidos,
Management of liquid and solid waste.
y por supuesto también algún manejo de la biodiversidad que tenemos en el ecosistema urbano. de
And
la
also
ciudad.
management of the little biodiversity or some biodiversity that's in the
Se
urban
pusieron
landscape.
algunas de las acciones que yo lo voy a ir pasando, no me voy a detener ahí, creo que no después que interactúen con preguntas sobre
Right, so
eso.
he's going to give a quick summary of some of the areas and actions, but he'd like to leave time so that you guys can ask
Algo que es
questions.
importante que quiero que sepan es que las redes como tal de servicios, es decir, tanto de abasto de agua potable, de electricidad, de gas, fueron redes muy viejas, es decir, son redes, por ejemplo, la de abasto de agua potable es una red que tiene aproximadamente 300 años de existencia.
So one thing that's important to know is that the network of services provided electricity, water, they're very old. So like, for example, the water system is 350 years
En
old.
muchos casos con serios problemas estructurales como tal, técnicos, que hace que casi el 60% de las fuentes, es decir, del agua que se abastece de las fuentes de abasto hasta el interior de la ciudad se pierde en el camino.
So, like for
So,
example,
sí,
70% of the water gets lost in transport.
Los residuales sólidos, porque es una ciudad, por supuesto, con un desarrollo turístico muy marcado, por lo tanto tenemos que mantener mucho la imagen paisajística de la
So
ciudad.
the solid waste is also a big issue because it's a very touristed city. They have issues with
Y
managing
por
this.
supuesto tenemos que también seguir reglas que también nos ponen, o regulaciones que nos ponen la UNESCO para poder
And they also have to follow the
patrimonio
regulations
cultural.
that UNESCO puts for them for their World Heritage Site.
Porque gracias a esa diversidad paisajística, arquitectónica, incluso cultural que tiene la ciudad, fue declarada en los sitios como sitio es decir, ciudad de patrimonio cultural de la humanidad.
So the cultural and, ¿cuál fue el último? Lo perdí.
La diversidad tanto paisajística en cuanto a
Right.
arquitectura
So the
y también a
diversity
nivel
of the
cultural.
landscape, infrastructurally, physically, the buildings, and culturally.
Tuvo una visión esa estrategia, que está aquí, no hay problema, no voy a
The mission and vision.
the mission and vision, that we were executing with this strategy. So there are some main environmental problems related there. So we selected 10 mainly here. And then we divided these problems in 3 big areas, as you see here. I only took one, I think, or maybe probably 2 of these environmental problems because they are so huge. Many environmental, they are related here. But of course, I don't have time to discuss with you. So some of them, for example, are, the deterioration of the flora and fauna related to the ecosystem, to the Havana Bay ecosystem. The other is the constraint for the development of the tourism, because we live from the tourism.
Tourism.
We need the tourism just to maintain the city and restore the buildings. So you can see some of the strategic targets, the actions proposed, and indicators. Because one of the biggest problems that it has the other strategy that it hasn't any indicators. So we were able to create, a system of indicators in order to see if we were working or not well or as much. So there are some problems here, some other problems here, because one of the challenges we have to face is the climate change. You saw some slides, with the waves taking care, way on to the city. We have sometimes the rainy season is really rainy, so there are muchos de los edificios nuestros son edificios que están sin ningún sistema estructural que sea un soporte sólido, sino que con argamasa y el sistema colonial. De alguna manera, cuando hay mucha lluvia, esas edificaciones se humedecen mucho. Y después, cuando hay un periodo de más, es decir, de reducción de la lluvia, muchas de las edificaciones colapsan.
So because it's a colonial, most of the buildings are colonial, they get very humid with the rainy season, and then that makes the buildings fall. So there's a big problem.
Y también porque muchas de las zonas que fueron desarrolladas al interior del centro histórico, otros municipios como Utopia, Centro Havana y El Pedado, eran de alguna manera ecosistemas naturales, eran más bien humedales.
So a lot of the city, even outside of Old Havana, were previously wetlands. And so these colonial buildings, colonial structures were built on.
Por lo tanto, es muy poco, es decir, el drenaje como tal de las aguas lluvias cuando caen a veces cuesta mucho trabajo que drenen hacia el océano. Y el drenaje directamente, es decir, no hay ningún sistema de bombeo, no hay ningún sistema de tratamiento.
There's no drainage system in the city, and so it's a big challenge for getting
Uno de los
water.
grandes problemas que tenemos que enfrentar es que el sistema de alcantarillado que recoge las aguas negras y las aguas sucias, en muchos lugares está conectado de manera ilegal con el sistema de drenaje público.
Ese no alcantarillaje.
Alcantarillado.
The sewage system.
Sewage. Yes. So the sewage system is not well connected to be able to drain properly.
Por lo tanto, como funciona en muchos lugares especie de un plato, es decir, un plato como ondulado, ¿no? Es decir, cuando llueve mucho no hay forma de que el agua pueda evacuarse al ecosistema de la Bahía de La Habana o a mar abierto en el caso de los pinos.
So a lot of the underground it's sort of a bowl shape, so the water doesn't have easy access for drainage.
Muchas de las veces las restauraciones que se hacen se restauran a nivel de las edificaciones, es decir, como tal techos, paredes. Sin embargo, las personas a veces se preguntan por qué muchas de las edificaciones se mantienen con un nivel alto de humedad, y es que muchas veces esa humedad sube desde las bases de las edificaciones hacia las paredes por arriba por capilaridad.
So a lot of the humidity is because of the capillary effect of the humidity rising up in the building, so it's very humid up on top as well.
Por lo tanto, la restauración es muy difícil, muy compleja y más que nada costosa
So
también.
because of that, the restoration is really difficult, very complex, and very costly.
Bueno, aquí seguimos con algunos de los problemas que tenemos. Cambio climático como nuestra principal problemática en estos momentos por la exposición que tiene la ciudad.
Right, and climate change being one of the biggest issues because of the location of the city.
No solo por el nivel directamente que puede incidir los efectos del cambio climático, sino también por las relaciones indirectas con él, tanto en la alimentación, salud.
So not only the direct effects, but also indirect in terms of health and food access.
O sea, me imagino que ellos sepan, por supuesto, los efectos del cambio
So I
climático.
imagine all of you know those types of direct and indirect effects of climate change.
Bueno, otro, por supuesto, en el caso de los residuos sólidos, que es especialmente mi competencia mayor.
So specifically with solid waste, which is where he most works,
There is, a big problem with the management of the solid waste of the city, because it's a combined system. O sea, hay una institución creada por el Estado y subvencionada por el Estado a nivel provincial
so there's an institute that's created by the state and subsidized by the state
que maneja los residuos generados a nivel domiciliario.
so that manages solid waste that's produced at a household level.
Pero nosotros tenemos que ser capaces, es decir, la oficina del historiador maneja los residuos que generan sus instituciones.
So the office of the city historian has to deal with institutos que están produciendo su.
Sí, sus instituciones como hoteles, cafeterías,
So
restaurantes.
so the office of the city historian has hotels and cafeterias and other sort of enterprises in Old Havana. So they have to deal with solid waste produced by
O sea,
those.
en una ciudad, en un municipio que aproximadamente vive 97,000 habitantes,
So in this municipality lives 97,000.
que es visitado, es decir, que es visitado diariamente por más de 200, casi a veces incluso 20,000, 30,000 turistas.
And sometimes 20 to 30 million tourists visit.
Pero que
Thank you. Please correct me.
pero que hay una población flotante también.
¿Por año? o
No, diario.
Diario, per day.
Pero que hay una población flotante también de muchas personas que vienen a trabajar a La Habana Vieja, que son de otros municipios, aproximadamente 3,000 personas
And then
diarias.
about 3,000 people that are that are commuters that
Es
come
muy
every day.
difícil manejar todos los residuos generados por cada uno de estos sectores.
So it's really difficult to manage all the solid waste in all these different sectors.
Por lo tanto, nos dimos a la tarea, en mi caso, buscando uno de los proyectos que permitiera gestionar los residuos a nivel del centro histórico.
So then this is one of their main projects is managing the solid
O sea,
waste.
aquí hay algunas de las líneas que tratamos de perseguir con esos proyectos,
So that's one of the main areas they work through projects.
que después van a ver un poco más con diapositivas que tenemos. Bueno, y esto es otra de las cosas que, por supuesto, el reciclaje como una medida también de necesidad, no solamente desde el punto de vista de los beneficios ambientales que pueda tener, sino también desde el punto de vista económico.
So then recycling also not only from the point of view of that it's good for the environment, but because of necessity.
Por supuesto, tenemos que ser viables en estos momentos de llevar estrategias que permitan a nosotros reciclar e ingresar de alguna manera económica también recursos para la oficina electoral que se puedan seguir manejando.
And through this, make sure that it's viable and is able to provide funding for the office.
Con la rehabilitación, I think it's better for me, to put you all the slides and then after, to listen some questions that you have. So we see, how it was before the restoration process of the city and how it's now. This is Plaza Vieja, one of the main squares we have there. So we restore the square like that. Those buildings, they were located in the old square. It's a huge job. Just look at here. You see here? Utopia. Just look at this building.
Which one?
This one. So sometimes it's really hard, when you don't have anything to work on, to create like that. So it's so much expensive sometimes. So what I have to say too is that every building that we restore, we left always the first floor for conventional activities, but the second one that there where it has more is art for houses, for housing, for school, for galleries, for concert. O sea, the diversity of functions that we put in those buildings again. So this is a planetarium. It was a project that we created with Japan. The other squares, Plaza San Francisco Asís. It was transforming like that. Now it's like this. This is Colegio San Jerónimo de Havana. Then we have a career that we created at around 4 years before. It calls, management of the heritage. So the only place that you can study this career in Cuba is just in this college. So Belén Convent is a place where we located all the social and humanitarian projects that we have in Havana, in the insurance office. So we attend there elderly people, young people, juniors, seniors, whatever, and then we try to integrate them with the community too. You see what's like that? Because one of the main purposes of our, work there is to work with people, our social work. You see elderly people there. Yeah, before and after. Okay, hotels because we need the money to decide the restoration. San Jose as a part of the cultural, restoration clinic there. Many palaces. It was, the wedding palace restored around 3 years before. The Malecón. Then we have many buildings restoring Malecón traditional too. So de hecho, I want to, o sea, que quiero que me ayuden en esta parte. El malecón. Un minuto más. Ok. O sea, creo que aquí podemos terminar incluso.
Okay.
El malecón tradicional justamente marcó la pauta en que la oficina del historiador comenzó a trabajar proyectos ambientalistas.
So the Malecón, the seawall, was one of the entry points for his office to start working on environmental issues.
Cuando comenzamos a trabajar en el malecón tradicional, se hizo necesario pedir muchas licencias ambientales al Ministerio de Ciencia, Tecnología y Medio Ambiente.
So when they started to do that work, they had to ask for a lot of licenses from the Ministry of the Environment.
Por supuesto que muchas de esas licencias fueron denegadas justamente porque la solución era sacar a todas las personas que vivían ahí y relocalizarlas en otras partes de la ciudad, lo cual no era viable para la oficina del historiador.
So one of the reasons a lot of the licenses were rejected was because they wanted to move a lot of people out, and the City of the Office Historian wasn't in agreement with that. They wanted to make sure
Por lo tanto,
so that they're apto to
comenzó un proceso de negociación y de esa manera el Ministerio de Ciencia, Tecnología y Medio Ambiente nos hizo muchas observaciones sobre el proceso de restauración que estábamos haciendo en la ciudad.
So in that process of negotiation, they gave a lot of advice about how to go about the rehabilitation of the cities and of the seawall.
De esa manera entonces tuvimos que empezar a negociar con muchos expertos de muchas instituciones cubanas para que nos dieran toda su experticia en ese proceso de restauración. Y ahí es que justamente comienza como tal la oficina del historiador a preocuparse por el entorno, es decir, por el ambiente como tal citadino.
So through that process they had to consult with many different experts in different institutes throughout Cuba, and through that experience his office decided to take on more seriously the issue of addressing environmental issues.
Porque su objetivo como tal era más bien desde el punto de vista cultural, mantener ese patrimonio.
Because the objective originally of the office was really looking at the patrimony and cultural heritage of the city.
Y de esa manera entonces fue que nos hicimos prácticamente amigos de esos ministerios, de esas instituciones, y hoy en día tenemos un intercambio constante en cada una de las acciones que se van a realizar.
So through that process they really became friends with key people in all the different ministries.
O sea, no pudimos sacar a esas personas de ahí, por supuesto es imposible desde el punto de vista económico, en fin, desde la infraestructura. Por lo tanto, lo que hicimos fue seguir, es decir, al pie de la letra cada una de las indicaciones que nos habían.
Would control for flooding and make sure there's good aeration.
No se pueden ubicar viviendas en esas primeras plantas. En caso de un proceso de evacuación, por supuesto, sería mucho más factible evacuar una tienda, una cafetería, una galería de arte que no personas viviendo en esas.
So they don't allow anybody to live on the first floors for ease of evacuation of people.
Y de esa forma, por supuesto, hoy en día tenemos que seguir constantemente cada una de las indicaciones que nos hacen ellos. Se hizo un proceso de evaluación.
Ellos son la comunidad.
No, el Ministerio de Ciencia, Tecnología y Medio Ambiente, que tiene por supuesto la facultad de regular todas las normas.
So in each step of the process, they always have to be consulting with the Ministry of the Environment.
Eso por supuesto hizo que hoy en día tengamos unas relaciones constantemente de intercambio, es decir, de retroalimentación, y son parte constante de cada uno de los procesos que nosotros llevamos a cabo en el centro.
Right, so through this, again, it's a feedback loop with the Ministry of the Environment, making sure they're always giving.
Ya, bueno, pues quisiera que me pregunten a mí,
Okay.
si acaso me voy un poco más
some
normal.
questions.
I need some questions, I don't want to talk. Okay.
Yeah, in some of the pictures you showed in Havana Vieja, in the Plaza Vieja, and most of the pictures, you see that the plaza and the streets don't have trees. And I wonder if you are contemplating including trees there, because trees can have lots of functions, from intercepting water pollution, from producing food, and also shade and lower the temperature of the center.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest fights I have every year with those people. But what happened there, our streets are so tight. Then we have electricity, gas, and water supplies. They were under those streets. So you have to take care of what kind of trees you put there. Because one of the main problems that we are facing right now is that we have all buildings and all of them are colonized for trees. Because if you are going to plant some trees on the city, you have to manage what kind of species. You have to restore, those species. So right now we want to work, just mostly development, just the trees, or maybe short plants, on balconies, the roof. That's what we want to do there.
Right.
In order, to reduce, the carbon emissions. So there is an institution that we call Áreas Verdes, inside the insurance office, and they lose, all those activities. But even, there were some buildings that were collapsing, and then, we didn't have any building for those spaces, so we, por momento, es decir, de manera temporal, I don't know how to say that.
For the moment?
For the moment, just we planted some trees in those parks, and then we left those parks for maybe 10 years. But right now, they are so well accepted by the population that we cannot make any buildings in those parks.
Right. Good point.
It's fascinating to hear that you have some buildings that were not used for many decades or centuries almost, and now all of a sudden they become available, then can be used by the community. So I'm curious about how the decisions are made on what use, and do you get proposals from the community? How is the decision making of allocation of spaces?
We have a master plan, and they have all the regulations about what kind of building could be used for housing, which one for a hotel, whatever. But mainly, I told you before, all the buildings we restore in the city, they have houses inside, the second one under their floor. And even, sometimes it's really hard for us to manage who is going to stay in the building and who is going to get out from the whole part of the city. Because when we started the restoration process in 1990, it was really easy to keep out the people from the historical part of the city because all the buildings were collapsing. But then, we didn't have so much tourism as we have right now. So just at the moment, everybody who lives, in the all part of the city, they want to stay there because they have more access, to the culture, to the entertainments, to make some business too, like sell handicraft, whatever. And then we have to combine. Then, this problem, this process is really hard for us because we need to talk. We need to work with socialists, like psychology or doctors, and then we have to combine some of the families to live out of the city, and then we supply them beautiful houses out of the city too, and they don't have to pay anything for going and live there. It's really hard.
The associated enterprise system that generates $370 million a year. Can you describe a little more what that is about?
Si la Vagonex, en honor a un cacique que vivía justamente en La Habana que se llamaba Vagonex. Y Havana, el nombre de la ciudad, se debe justamente también a la esposa de ese cacique que era Havana.
So Havana 1X is the name of the enterprise system, and it's named after one of the main caciques that lived in Old Havana durante el tiempo colonial, in the colonial period.
Y Havana, por supuesto, era la esposa de
And Havana
Vagonex.
was his wife.
So, ya de alguna manera tienen idea de cómo se originan los nombres Vagonex y Havana. Ese sistema de empresas se desarrolla justamente por un decreto especial que nos da el gobierno cubano, que es el decreto especial 143.
So the enterprise system was developed by a decree given by the government
Que se aprobó justamente en el año 1993.
in 1993.
Ahora, ese sistema, es decir, ese decreto nos permitió a nosotros crear nuestro sistema empresarial como un mecanismo de autosubvención financiera para el proceso de restauración.
So that decree allowed his office to set up this enterprise as a way to fund their work for
Con los
rehabilitating the
fondos
city.
que aportaba el gobierno cubano, es decir, el Estado, o los fondos que fuéramos capaces de gestionar por la cooperación internacional, no hubiéramos hecho casi ni el
So
2%
with
de lo que se ha
only
hecho hoy en día.
funds from the city and from international cooperation, they wouldn't have been able to do any of the rehabilitation.
Algunas veces las personas se preguntan por qué hacen otro hotel, por qué hacen una cafetería, por qué hacen un restaurante. Pero como vieron las cifras, casi el 56% de lo que ingresa a Vagonex se pone en proyectos sociales.
So sometimes people ask, why are they building another hotel? Why are they building another restaurant? That's not for the community, but as you can see, 56% of the money goes back into social programs.
Funciona entonces como un sistema hotel y servicios extra hoteleros,
So it functions in a system of hotels and extra hotel
como
services.
son cafeterías, restaurantes,
Restaurants,
tiendas para compras,
cafeterias,
sistemas de boutique.
Shops, boutiques.
Y también tenemos un sistema de oficinas que se rentan, es decir, una inmobiliaria que renta también oficinas para residentes en el país o para inversionistas que van a Ciudad de La Habana y hacen sus negocios también con
So then they also have a system of offices that people can rent for people doing business in the city from Cuba or from outside of Cuba.
También en estos momentos estamos trabajando con los cuentapropistas, que son las nuevas modificaciones económicas que creó el gobierno, Y esos cuentapropistas pueden rentar espacios en el centro histórico de la ciudad y se les cobra un impuesto, cuyo impuesto vuelve nuevamente otra vez a la oficina del historiador y se reinvierte en los procesos de restauración.
So now, with the new Cuban laws that allow for people to have small businesses, they're renting out some of these office spaces to those people and then taxing them, and that money goes back into the social programs.
Cada persona, es decir, cada turista que va a Cuba quiere visitar La Habana y más que nada La Habana Vieja.
Right, because every tourist who goes to Cuba wants to visit Havana and more so Old Havana.
Por lo tanto, la solicitud de esos espacios para rentas y tener pequeños negocios es muy alta comparado con lo que verdaderamente a veces se aprueba.
So the number of applicants that come in to try and rent those office spaces is very high. It's much more than they can.
Es complejo, pero de alguna manera nos ha dado resultados.
So it's very complex, but it's given them a lot of results.
¿Está bien así eso?
Sí, sí.
So, my question might be difficult to understand. If it's too much, just let me know. I'm thinking comparatively between different kinds of economies and systems. And one of the things we notice about our economy here in the US is they always talk about growth. There's always this tension, and we have a whole lot of other tensions built into our system, such as an increasing wealth inequality and driving of the middle class towards poverty. We would say about our system it's unsustainable. And we can't keep going the way we are. Sooner or later something's going to break, and who knows what it's going to look like. But in the meantime, I want to know, how do you feel about the sustainability of your system?
Se lo voy a responder en español. Sí, a veces es fácil hablar de sostenibilidad cuando tenemos una economía poderosa. Difícil es hacerlo cuando no tienes a veces ni para alimentarte. Que a veces es un poco fácil hablar de sostenibilidad cuando tienes una economía poderosa. Difícil es cuando a veces no tienes ni siquiera para alimentarte.
So it's not easy to talk about sustainability when you have a very powerful economy, and it's easier to talk about it when you have a less strong economy.
So,
Is that an illusion?
Is it the
of-
reverse?
The other way around.
The reverse.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So, por lo tanto, tuvimos que buscar un mecanismo que de alguna manera nos permitiera a nosotros generar nuestro proceso sin necesidad de contar con el apoyo financiero del gobierno. El gobierno tiene, por supuesto, que subvencionar muchas otras necesidades como el sistema de salud pública, el sistema de educación, el sistema de asistencia social, en fin, todos los demás servicios que se desarrollan, ¿no? O que se
Right, so they found they needed to develop their own mechanism to create sustainability within their office without being dependent on the subsidies from the government. The government has a lot of other responsibilities like health, education, and so they developed the system to be sustainable as an office.
Ese programa desarrollado por la Oficina Electoral, debo decir que es único en el país y me atrevería a calcular también único en muchos países, no solamente en
So
Cuba.
it's very unique, the system that they have in his office for Cuba, and he dares to say in the world as well.
Reconocido por muchas agencias de cooperación internacional, por las agencias de las Naciones Unidas como un modelo verdaderamente sostenible.
So highly recognized by international institutes, including the United Nations, as a sustainable model.
Mi concepto, es decir, mi opinión personal,
My personal opinion
estamos cerca pero todavía no es un modelo de sostenibilidad.
is that we're close, but we're not there yet as a sustainable model.
Durante este periodo que he estado aquí compartiendo con ustedes, visitando, hay muchos lugares que me han impresionado también.
So being here this week in Vermont, I've been really impressed by a lot of the models I've seen here.
Pero vivir en un centro histórico bastante compacto, donde hay una densidad poblacional bastante alta, muy alta,
So living in a city like Old Havana, where there's a very high density of population.
es decir, en cuanto a territorio y densidad, es el municipio de mayor densidad poblacional en el país.
So it has the highest population density in the country.
Incluso hay sistemas de control de la población que vive en el interior del centro histórico. Si se va una familia del centro histórico, solamente puede regresar una familia que...
Only the same amount of people can come back in.
Porque uno de los grandes problemas que tenemos en el centro histórico es el espacio, más que nada el espacio de vivienda.
Right, so one of their biggest issues is space and especially housing.
Entonces, este sistema que fue nuestra metodología, no sabemos si es la mejor, si es la peor, pero en algún momento, es decir, de alguna forma nos está dando resultados.
Right, so this method, he doesn't know if it's good or bad, but for them it's giving them good results.
Más que nada porque ha permitido que ese centro histórico sea un centro histórico vivo, donde no hay exclusión social, donde mucho del financiamiento que se gestiona va para proyectos sociales.
So, and even more so because it's a model that allows them to avoid any social exclusion. They're able to really focus on the social programs.
Y más que nada quiero decir que sobre todo con públicos bastante vulnerables. Trabajamos mucho con los públicos vulnerables como la tercera edad, niños con parálisis cerebral, niños con síndrome de Down,
And
con
especially
autismo.
they focus on the vulnerable sector of the population, so the elderly, children, Down syndrome, children, people who have cerebral palsy.
Y facilitamos la accesibilidad de todas las personas que viven en el centro histórico a todos esos servicios. La
To
oficina de hecho,
facilitate access to services for that, the more vulnerable
la oficina del
population.
historiador de hecho apoya muchas instituciones que no son de ella, como instituciones de salud pública, de educación, de asistencia social.
So the office works with a lot of other institutes like public health that aren't a part of their office. but
Como
people are
las
working with them.
maternos, escuelas de niños con problemas sociales, en fin, muchos proyectos que tenemos.
So different schools with schools for delinquent kids, centers for mothers.
E incluso hacemos una contribución a la cuenta única del Estado cubano también para otros proyectos que ellos destinen.
And they even put some money towards an account that's managed by the government for other social programs.
Y aquí también quiero hacer un énfasis y destacar, por supuesto, la labor de cooperación que recibimos de la Agencia de Cooperación Internacional.
And also he
que
wants to
ayuda mucho
emphasize
de los proyectos que tenemos.
the projects that are supported by international cooperation funds.
When I visited 3 years ago, we saw a large scale model of the greater Havana area, and any new development, any proposed new development was made in a different color, like white, to really stand out. And as I understand it, these were recycled wooden cigar boxes that architecture students made these scale models. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I'm sorry.
Debe ser en el parque metropolitano donde tienen esa la
Una
ciudad.
maqueta.
Sí,
Una maqueta.
de la ciudad.
Yo soy en Havana. No, tenemos una maqueta también en La Habana Vieja, donde se modela. Y de hecho cada uno de esos proyectos de impresiones que se va a realizar se modela con anterioridad y se evalúan todos los impactos que van a tener cada una de esas impresiones.
Él decía que usaban. No, I was going to translate what he said. I need to do the ghost
Sorry,
translator.
I'm sorry, between the two.
Que se usaba la caja que se usan para el tabaco, para hacer el edificio.
Ajá,
Una
sí.
maqueta.
So my question is, how much citizen participation does the average citizen have any input in terms of if a proposed development in her neighborhood or his neighborhood, or is it pretty much top-down government saying this is going to happen?
O sea, pasa así en algunos lugares de Cuba, pero no en La Habana Vieja.
So that happens in some places in Cuba, but not in
No,
Havana.
en La Habana. Porque es que no sé si daría tiempo, pero aquí tengo justamente ese proceso de consulta pública, un material de consulta pública de cómo se evalúa el programa especial de desarrollo
So
integral.
he had some slides that he was going to
No, it's
show.
like it's a documentary, but we don't have time to
A
see it.
documentary about the consultation with the community.
Porque justamente tenemos una estructura de gobierno a nivel municipal que
Sí, el
está
government
dividida por
structure.
consejos populares, por circunscripciones, y se hacen asambleas a nivel de esas circunscripciones mensualmente, donde las personas dicen cada uno de los problemas o preocupaciones que tienen.
So every month they have community meetings, community assemblies at the municipal level to deal with all the issues.
Sí, aquí le voy a repetir, ahora no sé si tú me lo podrás traducir. Cuando comenzamos esa restauración, muchas de las agencias de cooperación, incluso las Naciones Unidas, nos pedían restaurar solamente las edificaciones. Y el doctor Ulice Acosta en aquel momento dijo, si quiere comer pescado, o sea, nos decía, si queremos comer pescado, tenemos que comprar el pescado con la cabeza. No sé si coges la idea que más o
So
menos.
when they started to do restoration, UNESCO and other international groups were really only focused on the restoration of the buildings. And his boss, no sé si Azul me puedes ayudar o Juan Pablo. So if you're gonna eat the fish, you need to buy the fish with the head. And so,
Because the head, the sense, the people that live inside the historical zone.
right, so basically, the
So it's
the
a living
idea is that
process.
we need
It's
to
not a restoring on
address the issues of
individuals.
the people as well.
You buy the whole fish.
Right.
You buy the model fish. Okay.
You mentioned that there's no gentrification allowed in the old Cuba.
Not in Cuba.
Sorry, in the old
in
Havana.
the old Havana.
So as small businesses have been allowed with the reform policies. Is gentrification a problem in other parts of Cuba?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so, but we are more focused, in the elderly people in Havana.
Mhm.
So when we started to create, all this program, we identify, the many tragic publics that we have to work with. So one of them was the elderly people, because Havana citizenship is getting elderly, mostly, I don't know the exact amount, but I think we have an expertise of living plus 67 years in Cuba. So right now we are getting troubles, with their envejecimiento poblacional,
With the aging of the population.
with the Asian population. So many of the programs that we have there are oriented to this problem we have. So we were working with them, and then we saw some slides from the convent of Belén. And it was the first building we saw with that use, but right now we have 5 in the historical part of the city. So you can imagine, that elderly people can access to those services they have inside. Even they go there just to socialize between them. And sometimes, when we have storms or hurricanes, that affect the city, they can go there for living too, just to stay in a safe place. And they, they have support for everything like feeding or any kind of assistance they need, like hair assistance, wherever.
You do have other historical cities in the island that somehow are governed with the same principles of no gentrification and
Yeah.
just 7 other.
Yeah, we have many historical centers. So I think 2 years ago, we created a network from the historical centers. There are 5 historical centers, cooperating between them right now. So the historical office show them, and we teach them, how they can manage their historical centers, because of course, the policy we have at Havana, they don't have. So right now, we are trying to improve how we can cooperate together, because with our national heritage, that we are trying to preserve. So we mainly work for people. We have to restore the buildings, but the main purpose of us is the human being that live inside the city or wherever. Any question?
You talked about how you get a lot of tourism throughout, and they are a lot of the waste problem you have. But does the population itself that lives there accumulate a lot, or are they better with recycling and keeping waste down, or is it mostly the tourism?
Sí, una pregunta interesante. Sí, o sea, los patrones de consumo en realidad son muy diferentes entre el turismo que nos visita con la población que reside en el interior
Right,
de
so the
la
patterns of consumption between the tourists that visit and the people who live in the city are very different.
Me gustó mucho la planta de compostaje que me llevaste a
So
ver,
he really enjoyed the Green Mountain Compost site that we
porque
visited.
justamente más del 60% de lo que nosotros generamos en residuos sólidos es justamente el componente orgánico.
So more than 60% of their solid waste is food waste.
Sin embargo, el turismo que visita la ciudad tiene un componente, si la generación de residuos por ello más bien está orientada a plásticos, papel y cartón, aluminio, y no tanto el componente orgánico.
Lo que está producido por el turismo.
Can I sit?
Yes.
Sí, el turismo tiene un patrón de consumo muy diferente al de la
Right, so
población.
the tourism produces more of the plastic and the cardboard paper, those types of.
Pero debo decir que en realidad todo el turismo, o casi todo el turismo que nos visita es verdaderamente sensible a la generación de residuos
So for the
sólidos.
most part, the tourists that visit are very sensible to the.
Incluso este proyecto que nosotros comenzamos de gestión de residuos sólidos al interior del centro histórico está muy orientado a nivel de los hoteles, cafeterías, restaurantes, donde va mucho consumo a nivel del turismo.
So a lot of the work that his office does is geared towards the hotels and the restaurants and cafeterias where a lot of that waste is coming from.
Y fue un impacto muy positivo para esas instalaciones, que le diéramos todo un material de comunicación que ellos comenzaron a divulgar por todos sus espacios. Y el turismo que fue llegando a esos lugares, a esos hoteles, cafeterías, restaurantes, se sensibilizó mucho.
So they provided information to, how do you say sensibilize, to raise awareness about recycling in the hotels and the cafeterias and the restaurants, and then those workers there use that to also educate the tourists.
Creo que es decir, el cambio a nivel cultural tiene que ir más enfocalizado sobre todo a la población residente, no justamente al turismo.
So they have to do more now with raising awareness amongst the actual
Por lo
population.
tanto, las
that lives there.
campañas que nosotros desarrollamos al interior de la ciudad más bien están centradas en el público, en el residente.
So in the campaigns in the interior of the city are targeted more towards the
Porque el
population.
turismo entra y sale, pero el residente sí vive ahí.
Right, because tourism's come and go, but the people are there always. Residents.
Any more questions?
No? Yeah? No?
Okay.
One more?
I take questions.
I'd like to ask you to revisit the question I asked because I was looking for a different kind of answer from the one you gave. I was wondering if the system taken together that you're embedded in, if you feel like it can just keep rolling on, if it is sustainable in the sense that everybody continues to participate in the way that they do and the society continues to evolve in the direction it's going, you're cleaning up your waste, so you're providing food, you've got the agricultural sector, you've got the, whatever philosophies you have about how you want to run your society. Do you feel that the entire community of Cuba is sustainable in the sense that it can continue functioning on its present philosophy and activity?
Pero a nivel general, a nivel del país.
Right, so I think he understood your question earlier as his office, and so now
That's-
you're really asking more about Cuba as a whole. And
I am.
so-
Because I'm getting the
and-
picture
and-
of how you participate in the big thing. Now I'm asking about the big thing.
O sea, es una pregunta en realidad bastante compleja de responderle a él.
It's a very complicated question to answer.
Porque aunque hay una estrategia nacional, cada uno de los territorios tiene su propia estrategia también.
So, okay, so there we have a national strategy at the national level, but each province also has their strategy.
Por ejemplo, una de las grandes interrogantes que tenemos en estos momentos ahora es la creación de sistemas de cooperativas en Cuba.
So one of the big questions and things we're working on in Cuba is the development of cooperative systems.
De manera que las personas, es decir, productoras a nivel de agricultores, de ganaderos,
Within agriculture, producers, livestock,
personas, es decir, incluso hasta el sistema público en estos momentos se está cooperativizando también.
even the public sector is becoming cooperativized.
Porque estuvimos viviendo, es decir, durante todas estas últimas 4 décadas, todo en Cuba verdaderamente subvencionado por el gobierno
Because over
cubano.
the past 4 decades, really everything has been subsidized by the Cuban government.
No es posible que sigamos
So
subsidiando
we
cada
can't
una.
keep doing that.
Es mejor entonces estimular desarrollo a nivel local, que
So it's
sea
better
más
to
sostenible.
stimulate local development that's more sustainable.
Y creo que hay muchas cooperativas en estos momentos que están siendo muy positivas,
So he thinks that there's a lot of people that are doing great
como
things
un
right
modelo
now
nuevo de sostenibilidad.
as a new model for sustainability, and with the cooperativism as being one of the.
Anteriormente era muy difícil, por ejemplo, para los emprendedores de negocios privados querer esos permisos. Ya en estos momentos el gobierno vio la necesidad de facilitar un poco la aprobación de esos permisos y que las personas sean capaces de producir. Y ahí tenemos, pues, decir, productores muy buenos y muy destacados en el país de cualquier tipo de inmobiliario, es decir, de mobiliario.
So with the new laws that have been passed recently for supporting entrepreneurs, that's really helped for this
Incluso se ha aprobado
sustainability
también
to take
hasta la
place.
creación de cooperativas constructivas, es decir, como inmobiliarias, como
Right, so
agencias.
there's even cooperatives around real estate. And
Es un cambio
buildings.
económico que fue abismal para el país, que no sabíamos si iba a ser positivo, de hecho todavía está siendo en evaluación, no quiere
Right,
decir
so
que
it's a big economic change for their system, and really they're still figuring out if it's going to work.
o sea, estamos tratando de buscar una solución a nuestros problemas desde dentro del
Right,
país.
so trying to look for solutions for these problems from within their country.
Thank you.
And can I ask just how much comes from outside? I mean, you mentioned UNESCO funding and Swiss international development funding.
International cooperation, 25 million a year. So, es un sistema de cooperación que en realidad ha sido reconocido a nivel internacional. La transparencia con que trabaja nuestro mecanismo de cooperación internacional es muy bien reconocido en Cuba, en el mundo también.
So the cooperation system that they have in his office is very well recognized because of its transparency.
Es una garantía para las agencias de cooperación y para gobiernos también de países, por
Right,
supuesto,
so
que
it's a
cooperan con
guarantee
Cuba.
for the donors as well as for
Trabajar con la oficina del
to
historiador.
work with his office.
How
Y de-
much?
Ajá.
Okay, no. but
Okay.
How much is 500 million pesos in dollars?
You have to convert 5 million is $1 is 25 kilo pesos. It's almost nothing. I don't know if I answered your question. So, just related to your question, so when we work, just on international cooperation, we don't get everything from the agency. We put there too. So the historian's office, sometimes, for example, face the construction of the building, and then we get the other money, from the international cooperation, as it's just more focused to buy, the appliances or whatever, for workshops or other things. But mostly, all of these projects that we have in Havana, they are sustainable because we don't start any project unless that we have the assurance that we can continue after when the fund, when they run finish. So it's really hard for us sometimes, to relocate and identify what are the main purposes that we have to develop in the other part of the city. So right now it's very common, that sometimes we have, unas sesiones de planeamiento previo justamente a la identificación de esos proyectos de cooperación.
So management plans previous to the projects.
Y justamente en los últimos 3 años, el Ministerio de Economía y Planificación cubana exige que
So in
usted
the past 3
planifique,
years, the Ministry of
exige que
Economy
usted
and Finance
planifique desde el año anterior en dónde usted supuestamente va a utilizar las finanzas que está solicitando, incluso para la cooperación, no a nivel de proyecto, sino también para los
requires that with a year in advance you state where you're going to be using.
como un mecanismo de reorganización de la economía a nivel nacional.
As part of one of the mechanisms in the reorganizing of that.
Y esos proyectos que nosotros solicitamos tienen que ser prioridades del país también.
And those projects have to be in line with the priorities.
Y así sucede también con el resto de las provincias. Por ejemplo, cuando trabajamos con la FAO en estos momentos, tiene que ser seguridad alimentaria, es uno de los problemas que más seriamente
Right, so
estamos
with
enfrentando en el
projects we have, for
país.
example, with the FAO, it has to be food security as the priority.
Y eso se planifica desde el año anterior. Tiene que ser así.
And that's
¿no?
planned from a year before.
Que nos toma muchas horas de trabajo, jalando los pelos, porque usted no sabe
Many
qué va a
hours
hacer.
of work pulling our hair out. Creo que lo vamos a hacer. So I think we'll close it here, and we'll be here for a few questions afterwards if you want questions.